Welcome into the For Talking Podcast. I am your host, Corey Tusick. I got Joe Bartnick and Josh Yohe here. Josh with The Athletic, obviously, and Joe Bartnick of the Soft Dumps segment on DVE, also the Puck Off podcast, and also you write a little bit of hockey too. So I want to give you a chance to plug that as well. I saw your playoff predictions.
I write for the Pro Hockey News a little bit, but it's a misnomer because I'm by nowhere near a pro at writing, and I can't even say that. It's like me pretending to be an actor next to Robert De Niro. I'm with Josh Yohe. Like I'm not a writer. It's a nice thing to put on the resume sometimes. Get me into a few places, but no, Josh Yohe is one of the best hockey writers there is. So please.
I try to be a comedian, but I'm no Joe Bartnick myself. So we'll just call it a deal. That's why this podcast works. We just, it's equal opportunity for everyone involved. Joe's in California. I'm in Canada this weekend, but Corey's in Pittsburgh at least. So at least somebody's local.
And it's cold. So, we're back to Pittsburgh cold.
And all three of us have one major bond. We love the Penguins. And it's, oh my God, what happened? we're here for an hour and a half to talk about this and some playoff picks. And it's funny because me and Josh, we really are aligned. We think a lot alike. I think that's why I love your writing. I seem to think, I'll let Corey host and talk because I just have so many. I think I want to interview Josh for an hour and a half about the Penguins.
No, I'm here to just guide the ship. So I'm gonna turn it over to Joe because I know he's got a bunch of questions for Josh. But just to recap, obviously we all know what happened with the Penguins. A little too late, and then we never got any help there at the end. I think the problem was Joe was no longer in the cathedrals over in Italy praying. There's a direct correlation to Joe coming out of the church and the Penguins falling apart. So we're not in the playoffs. The playoffs started without us, and let's start there. I don't think they deserved a playoff spot. And Josh, you were in the locker room. What the vibe on cleanout day had to have been a little somber.
Well, I'm going to get to cleanout day in a second, actually, but the vibe in the last 2 or 3 weeks was incredible because it was great theater, wasn't it? And when I think of the Penguins, you can think of the Stanley Cups, all the talent they've had over the years, but I always think of just theater and drama. This is never a boring organization. They'd rather beat you 7-6 instead of 2-1. Even the greatest players in Penguins history have had Sid's concussions or Mario's cancer. There's always drama in every direction. And the last few weeks, it was unprecedented, really. They got on this roll. They got one break after another. And then the last 3 nights of the season, they couldn't get one break from any team, whether it was the Capitals or the Bruins or the Flyers or the Islanders. Didn't matter. I got to ask Joe a question. Joe wants to ask all me these questions, but Joe, what was life for you like in California the last few nights? Did you have like one game on a TV, one on a laptop, and one on a phone? Like what was the setup there?
Well, it's funny is I just assumed that the Red Wings were going to win, and they're in my top 5 of teams I enjoy watching. But I just thought they were going to win, and I only watch the Flyers when they're losing. I turn on the games. I never watch them when it's tied or at the beginning of a game. That's how much I hate them. So I was watching Toronto and Florida game, Toronto, Florida, and I will go on record. I've been on record as saying I wasn't rooting for the Flyers. I will commit my hockey suicide. I don't need help from the enemy. If you rooted for the Flyers, we were going to lose on the island anyway, because that's just the bad karma we would have got. If somehow they lost, okay, whatever. But I will never root for them. And I'll tell you, Tortorella knew exactly what he was doing. You can't bullshit me. And I'll tell you, other than the fact he likes dogs, that's the only thing I respect about him. Because if the Penguins, if we were in that position, I would want Sully to pull the goaltender. I would want Sid to skate down, shoot the puck in the net, and say, F you, Philly, 1975 forever.
I'm getting detoured already because that reminded me of a Torch story when he was coaching Vancouver about 10 years ago when the Penguins still practiced at South Point. He did his little press conference because Vancouver had a practice there. And then he just looks at me. I've never even spoken with Torch before. He looks at me and says, "Hey, you like dogs?" I said, "Sure." He whips out his phones or show me pictures of his black labs. He goes, "I got all these dogs. I got like 50 acres of property. They're so happy. I said, that's great. And then that was the end of the conversation. It was just very, very out of nowhere. But yeah, it was it was interesting when Philly pulled the goalie and trying to figure out if they knew what was going on in the other games. That's a hell of a way for the season to end. And in retrospect, Detroit won anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered, I guess. But Philly pulling the goalie, you knew the Capitals were going to get the empty netter. It was kind of a given, especially the way that game was going. There wasn't much offense anyway. Just a bizarre few days to end the season. And ultimately, the Penguins made their bed the first 5 months of the season. So I don't think anybody's feeling sorry for them. I don't think they should. But I think we knew when we started this podcast last week, that loss to Boston and all the other things that happened on Saturday last week, that was probably going to haunt them. And indeed it did. I will say this. This might make me sound like a Penguins homer. I don't care. I'd rather see the Penguins and Sidney Crosby in the playoffs than we'll have to watch the freaking New York Islanders for 4 or 5 games. They're so boring. Like I'm a hockey writer. It's what I do, and I had a hard time getting through that game. I don't want to watch a 2-1 game with the Islanders. I've done enough of that. So I think for the sake of entertainment, the Penguins and Red Wings really would have been preferable to Washington and the Islanders, who I just don't think are all that much fun to watch.
1,000%. I imagine being a Red Wing fan though, like my puck up partner Frazier. I mean, just the height of. I mean, when they scored with 2 seconds left, it was like, oh my god! And then they find out like in overtime that they had no chance.
I know.
Just insane. You talk about a team on a heater though, with some good mojo. The Red Wings were coming in on. Once the Islanders got the 3rd seed, I was like, I wanted us to get the 3rd seed and the Red Wings to be the 2nd wild card. Then I think it had been so much more fun. See, I'm not a writer. Not funny, funner, more fun in the playoffs. Because we are missing something, and I'm picking the Rangers, but I think the old man's gonna him and Oshie and Tommy. I think they have a few tricks up there. They're gonna make it interesting, to say the least. I believe.
They might. I mean, and listen, we can talk about how all these teams in the East stink, and they do, but I have to give Washington some credit. The last 3 games, they beat Tampa, they beat Boston, then they went to Philly and won. That was pretty impressive. I mean, you got to give them credit. Because when the Penguins went down there a few weeks ago and beat them pretty easily, I said to myself, these Capitals aren't a playoff team. Like they're one of those teams, like some teams pass the eye test, some players pass the. You see Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid in person, it's like, holy shit, I've never seen. Like, yeah, he's great. You see the Capitals play in person, they're so slow and plodding. Like you just say to yourself, this team's no good. But they play defense. So I'll give them that. They're hard to score against. And they probably should have won that game in Detroit a few days earlier. They really outplayed them, right? So, oh no, they did win that game. I'm going to mix it up. They got lucky that game, but they don't give up goals. They're hard to score against. So, Penguins probably could take a lesson or two from some of the teams that made the playoffs. You can't play 5-4 hockey games every single night and expect to win when your best players are in their mid-30s.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than 15-16, We got to reel it in a bit.
Well, I'm going to ask both of you cats. It was in my prime viewing age, early 20s and prime, the 3 in a row would be, Jordan era. I think I said this on this podcast last week. I'm still scarred from 93. Like, I don't know if I didn't want to, I almost couldn't handle that game meaning something on Long Island or Queens on Wednesday night. Like, I mean, we couldn't beat Chicago when they were trying to lose last year to get into the playoffs.
I mean, you knew we were going to lose that game. You called it last week. You did.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You called that was definitely, we were going to lose that game no matter what.
Something. It would have been high theater though, right? I think Josh, you wrote this. What if that penalty shot for Sid would have been for the playoffs? I mean, how crazy would that have been? Well,
Sid being Sid, he probably would have scored in that spot, but maybe not because, like you said, it was the Islanders. And we were huddled. We had some monitors set up right behind the Penguins bench when Sid had the penalty shot. Sometimes we have to go down early to get into the locker room and stuff. So there was some Islanders writer. He looks at me, some young kid. I didn't even know who he was. He says, "Oh, Crosby's going to score." I said, "You don't know your Penguins Islanders history at all, young man, do you?" I said, he's not going to score. Come on. There's no way. And it's funny. I guess we should touch on that game. The Jeff Carter stuff. We kind of had a sense going into that game that might be it for old man Jeff. And then when I saw Sid give him the opening faceoff and Sid slid over to left wing and Carter took the draw, I said, uh-oh, it's definitely the game. Then Islanders TV showed Megan Carter, Jeff's wife, in the crowd in the second period. Uh-oh, but we definitely know what's going on here. To see Crosby set him up for that goal in the third period, taking nothing away from Carter, I'm really happy that he scored. It was a great moment. But that's how great Sid is. His only objective is, I'm going to find a way to set up Jeff Carter for a goal in the third period. And Jeff doesn't score many goals these days. So I'm going to just put one on a platter for him and give him a tap in. And it's exactly what he did. It was just a very cool moment. It's kind of cool when great players just feel like doing something and they find a way to pull it off. And that's exactly what that was.
Now, can we get Noel Achari and Jansen Harkins to retire too? Is that possible? I mean, isn't it sad that after Lars Eller, he was our best bottom six guy, and 2 years ago he was an albatross, and now it's like he's one of our best. He's our second.
What
best
would we have done without Jeff Carter?
Yeah.
No, for all the crap that he takes, and last year when he was a third line center last year, that was not a good thing. We all know that. I thought he was okay this year. I mean, really, there were a lot of people on this team that were a bigger problem than Jeff Carter. That's for sure. I thought about going on FanDuel and putting some money on Jansen Harkins to score against the Islanders simply to amuse myself. Like, wouldn't it be funny if this guy scored a goal in the last game of the year? He hasn't scored all year, but then I thought better of it.
Well, that's a bigger point. Why isn't Zohorna? Why isn't Puljujärvi? Why don't they dress 7 defensemen? Like, what is the point of Jansen Harkins? I mean, he's like Blutowski, 0 point, no assists, no points, no hits, nothing. He literally brings nothing to the table.
And the problem is they just have so many guys you can say that about, though. I mean, he might be an extreme example, and they didn't take him out of the lineup. I guess they liked his defensive work. That's the best answer I can give you. But Puljujärvi and Emil Bemster. I know Bemster scored 3 goals, but I don't think he's very good. Like, they just have all these bottom 6 guys that, other than Lars Eller, there was just nothing there. And I was thinking about that during the Boston game. Crosby only had 1 point against Boston. And it's like, yeah, when you play against a really good team like Boston, they're going to slow him down a little bit. No one else can score. There's no third or fourth line help ever. And it's been like that for a couple of years now. The pressure that it puts on the big guys, it just gets more and more immense. And I think it's Kyle's biggest job in this offseason. If he wants to make them better, you got to find some depth scoring.
Well, what gets me in this whole process and this has gone, this goes way years. It goes back to the Cups that they don't have anymore, is I just don't see how you can't throw a dead cat in Ontario and find 6 guys that wouldn't cut off their left arm to go forecheck for Sid and Gino. Like, it's their lack of, anger and belligerence that gets me. I don't care if you score, but can you run someone through a wall? I mean, you're in the third and fourth line. We get a bunch of guys that think they're just, I don't know, like they're granted, it's their birthright to skate for 10 minutes on the third line, as opposed to earning it, except for, really, I like Boosted is played okay, but in general, these journeyman guys, what are you doing here?
Yeah. You got to make an impact somehow, right?
I enjoy name dropping, so I have to. I was on an elevator years ago with Phil Esposito, and who still does color commentary for Tampa. Espo just says it how it is. He looks at me. He says, "The problem with the Penguins is." I said, "What's that?" He said, "All their bottom 6 guys are all over 30." He said, "You can't have that. The young guys are hungry. They'll run through a wall for you." And I know what he meant. And it's been a problem. You're right, for the Penguins. They're so polite.
It's one of my favorite quotes that people bring up all the time. I go, I want my fourth line to be living in the hotel next to the practice facility. I don't want them on their second house.
Right. That's true. I mean, and it's been a problem for years with the Penguins. The lack of fire that we see from them all the time.
Alarming.
They're so easy to play against. You don't see people who look really, truly committed to winning. You see it with Sid. You see it with Rusty. There's a few guys. but the young guys who get called up often just look like they're out for a Sunday stroll. I don't know if that's a problem with the coaching staff, if it's bringing in the wrong people to the organization. You can point fingers at a lot of different directions, but man, there's a passive feel to how they play that drives you crazy.
Yeah, there's a direct correlation between how much people like to play against you and how good you are as a hockey team.
Yeah.
Like whenever, and that's the problem. I mean, in 15, 16, all of a sudden we became that team that everybody's like, oh my God, I got to play the Penguins. Like they're going to be relentless. They're going to be on me all. And, and now it's like, Boston was sitting there licking their chops going like, oh man, we got a game here in Pittsburgh. This is an easy one. Let's, pad a couple stats. Ended up being a little bit more of a game, but I mean, yeah, I think Dubas. I mean, in his press conference, he kind of mentioned that we need to get younger and everything. You think he's alluding to that? What he's going to do with the bottom six?
I do. I mean, he knows that's a huge concern. And listen, I would rather have to fix the bottom six as opposed to the top six. It's a lot harder to get top six guys. The Penguins still have a few really good top six guys. So theoretically, it can be done. The Penguins will have a little bit of spending room under the cap, not a ton this summer. I think they'll have around 12 million in space right now. I fully expect a trade or two to try to bring in some more space. I think Riley Smith is an example of a guy who could go. Kyle would like to have more money to play with for sure. But the bottom six, it's a huge problem. Lars Eller was your only really competent guy on the bottom six, and he's no spring chicken himself. So yeah, the Drew O'Connor is a guy who'd be a great third line winger, but they might need him as a top six winger, the way things are on their lineup right now. So a lot of decisions for Kyle to make. But yeah, he always talks about the Penguins needing to get younger and faster. And I asked him at his press conference the other day, I said, Kyle, the way you guys played the last month, did that alter your plans? In other words, did you maybe think, oh man, this team's better than I realized? I better maybe alter the plan a little bit this summer. And he said, no. He said, that's great that we had a great run. We still need to get younger and faster. And he said, what we did in the last month does not take away from the team we were in January and February and March. And it was refreshing to hear him say that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if he meant it. I think he did. But I think when you watch the playoffs now, you see these teams with the young legs that they have. That's what wins in the playoffs. And old teams, you can win in the playoffs with an old Sidney Crosby or an old Evgeny Malkin, but if your whole team's old, man, that catches up to you.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, again, nothing against Jeff Carter. I think he found his role there in the fourth line, but yeah, we just need an overhaul. And like Joe said, if Jansen Harkins could retire, I mean, God, if you wanted to see a train wreck, social media on Penguins, they posted a picture of Harkins at the morning skate. It said like, look who's on the ice, and I was like, oh my God, like I got to go down and check these comments. It was just a murderer's row.
Well, but that's my thing with Sully, and I've said this many times. I love Sullivan, what he did for our franchises, but his reluctant. I mean, how is Jansen Harkins better than Sam Poulin? I don't even care if he is. I mean, Harkins does nothing. There's a chance Poulin might get better at some point. I mean, Zahorna. I mean, he disappointed me his last time I was, but I've always thought he can't teach 6'7". Give him a chance. It's just giving someone a chance when that Harkins can't do anything. Yeah, and some other guys that you just know aren't going to be any better.
Well, and look at what happened when Jack St. Ivan he got a chance. I think he's pretty good. I think he's on the third pairing to start next season, if I had to guess. I think he really opened up some eyes. And no, I think it's a fair point. We know some of these young players just aren't very good. We know that. But when you've got veterans who you clearly know what their ceiling is and it's low, why not take a chance on some guys in your system, whether they were top picks or seventh round picks or undrafted, whatever. I agree with you, Joe, and it's been a problem for the Penguins for a really long time. So, and when you look at we talk about it all the time, look at 16 and 17, where would the Penguins have been without Brian Rust and Connor Sherry and Tom Kuhnhackl, Matt Murray? These were all rookies in 2016. Where were they at without Jake Gensel in 2017 as a rookie? If you know your Penguins history, you know how important that can be. And I always say Sidney Crosby plays at his best and is his most comfortable as a captain when he has a bunch of young guys to play with. He didn't really like that locker room with Brooks Orpik and Craig Adams and Matt Cook. Like, it wasn't as comfortable for him. He likes being old man Sid and likes having a bunch of kids around to kind of show the way. And I think you saw that late in the season. I think there's something to that in all seriousness. So hopefully Kyle Dubas will continue to bring in some younger players, because I just think that's something the Penguins so badly need at this point. It's almost not even worth mentioning because we know it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you think is there going to be a push on Sullivan in any way to say, like, look, you got to play the young guys. We can't have these. I don't know if it'll be a Moneyball level where Kyle Dubas is going to walk in and trade all the guys that Sullivan wanted to play instead of the young guys. But to me, there was some kind of reluctance. I didn't understand it.
Well, I don't think maybe Sullivan will be told that, but I don't think it was just a Sullivan thing the last few years that no young players came up. I don't think Kyle Dubas thought a lot of the young players in the system were that great. I don't think Ron Hextall thought a lot of them were that great. I know Jim Rutherford didn't think some of them were that great. So I think it's easy to say it's all Sullivan. I don't know that he has complete say in that. I do think it's a collaborative effort with he and Dubas, and they get along really well. And Dubas said it himself. Now, some might say Kyle was being a little disingenuous when he said it's not the coaches, it's not the players, it's all on me. I'm the one who put this whole thing together. But he said it, and there was some accountability to that, and maybe he realizes I got to find a way to get a few better younger players in here so Mike Sullivan has the chance to make that decision. So I think the upcoming summer, we always say this about the Penguins, but I think the upcoming summer is a fascinating one to see how aggressive Kyle will be if they can get some younger players into the lineup. Maybe they find a bargain in free agency, some wingers, some older guys who just want to play with Sid and Gino. So there's a lot of different directions this thing could go in, and we didn't even get to the goaltending yet.
Yeah, that was gonna be my follow-up. But go ahead, Joe.
No, I think maybe the biggest matzo ball, and you alluded to it on our text chain, is Christopher Letang.
Yeah, a little bit more of an injury than we thought.
Yeah. I mean, is it an LTIR situation? Is it we don't know if he's going to come back from it situation? I mean, that really changes everything, Josh.
It does. And I think we can all agree something was not right with him the last couple of months of the season, because October through January, Letang was terrific.
Best Letang ever, in my opinion.
He embraced this new role, kind of a more defense first. His penalty killing was so good. One of the best PK guys in the league. Just his two-way game was outstanding. I thought he was much better than Carlson the first 4 months of the season, quite honestly. And the last 2 months, he was terrible. I mean, he was awful. The goals against that were strictly against him it was a disturbing amount. So I don't doubt that he was hurt. I'm sure that he is. Now, here's what happened at the end of the season. Corey, you brought up locker room day.
Mm-hmm.
I was not at locker room day because the Penguins decided to have locker room day 12 hours after the Islanders game ended, when most of the Penguins media was still in New York. We weren't very amused about that.
Oh, I believe it.
Didn't get a chance to ask certain questions that we would have liked to have asked. But I know Chris met with the media that day that was there. He said his body felt fine. No big deal. And then later that day, Mike Sullivan said he was dealing with some stuff. And then Kyle Dubas the next day on Friday said to those who didn't hear that, Chris is dealing with a lot of things and he is currently seeking a second opinion. When you hear those words, that's scary. Like, if you're seeking a second opinion, that means you got really bad news about something and you might be out for a long time. So I am anticipating we will get some news on Chris in the next couple of months. Or next couple of weeks rather. I didn't like the tone of that, especially given his health history. And I'm not going to guess what it was, but this is a guy who's had multiple strokes, who's had career-threatening neck surgery, concussions, you name it. He's had every serious injury there is. So you worry about him moving forward. He's got 4 years left on his deal. They are so much better when he's playing well. But when he's out of the lineup or when there's something wrong with him, they are not close to the same hockey team.
No, and that's what made it so disturbing is
Yeah.
not his injury issues, his medical issues.
Uh-huh.
To me, that's what made it seem like, well, maybe he didn't want to bring it up, but I wanted to do something that I don't know if I'm gonna get crap for it, but I want to defend Erik Karlsson on two levels here.
Ooh.
One is I will
Go for
quote
it.
my great friend, fellow comedian, we'll be at the Improv together at the end of May, and Puckoff co-host Andy Picaro, who said, "What did you think Karlsson was going to play like? He didn't get $11 million by playing defense. Like what did you think was going to happen?" I thought that was bang on by Andy. But my defense of Karlsson is going to be this: I was watching one of my favorite players to watch that I would pay to see, Cale Makar, the guy who Wayne Gretzky said reminds him of Bobby Orr. Oh, Wayne skipped over Paul Coffey. That's how good Cale Makar is.
Wow.
Well, I saw in a 3-1 hockey game, the Avs are playing the Golden Knights. Big game. What does Makar do? He leaves the front of the net, chases someone behind the net. Beautiful pass right out front. Bang, 3-2. The comeback is on. Golden Knights win in overtime. So if Cale Makar can do that with a great coach, and I guess the Penguins can do it. It's like it seems, is that like the flying V goaltender thing? Now they're just told to go behind the net. Like I can't blame Karlsson anymore if Cale Makar is going to be that stupid.
Erik Karlsson, like he is who he is, right? You're right. I mean, we knew he wasn't good defensively. I don't even know that he's bad defensively. I just don't always think he gives a shit about defense. Much like Paul Coffey didn't particularly care about defense. Karlsson is one of my favorite players ever to cover already after a year. He's brutally honest. Like when you talk to him, like a lot of hockey players, we're like, I love Sid to death, but like they could lose 10-0 and Sid will say, well, we did some good things and we worked hard. Erik Karlsson said, I said, Erik, we were in Long Island. It was morning skate, the last day of the season. And I said, Erik, I'm so sorry to bring up the power play again. I think it's about the 20th time I've asked you this season. He looks at me. He says, you should be asking me about it because we're the worst power play in the league. And we got a bunch of Hall of Famers and we shouldn't be. It's like, whoa. You don't hear that kind of honesty, but Karlsson will say it like it is. But then you watch him play, and to me, you understand why he has people that criticize him, and you also understand why he has people who defend him. He brings everything to the table, good and bad. I thought he was great down the stretch. I thought the last 2 or 3 weeks, like that's the Erik Karlsson that you really want. I think it is really important to put the right players around him. Marcus Pettersson's great with him. Chris Letang, if he's healthy, great. And P.O. was better, but I don't really think P.O. is a top 4 defenseman.
Now he played a little better at the end though, but then where did he slot with Ivany? I actually thought Shea, who just cleared waivers, I thought Shea was a very serviceable 6-7.
He's fine, right? But I think with Karlsson, you either have to leave him with Pettersson all year next year, or you have to go out and get a really reliable defensive veteran guy to play with him because he's just so unique the way he plays the game. But I'll say this. I was underwhelmed by Karlsson at times. I thought he could have been better, but he wasn't the problem. Erik Karlsson's way down the list of problems with the Penguins, and I still think it was a great trade when you consider all the crap they got rid of.
Right? I've said it all year. I thought it was a great trade. I will say this though, and Kulikov was playing pretty good when I was watching the Big Cats today. Kulikov, I hate to say, is garbage. He could have played better for us, but I think he's a serviceable guy. But that's who did Karlsson excel with? Vlasic and Mathot. They just need a guy that just is a big goof that stands in front of the net with Karlsson, because I thought Petey got worn down. I thought he was much better at the beginning of the year. I thought he played incredible. I thought by the end of the year he was a little worn out from always having to cover up for Karlsson.
No, that happens. And also Pettersson weighs about 120 pounds. So you always worry about him like come game 60 as opposed to October. He does have a tendency to wear down, even though I thought he had a really good season.
He did. And 2 years ago, if you would have said he's our best defenseman, I would have jumped off a bridge. but he might be.
Oh,
All in all, he put some great months together the last 2 years.
he's the most reliable defenseman they have for sure. He's turned into a really good player, a legitimate top four guy. But yeah, playing with Carlson and Letang all year, that'll take some years off your life. Right, but years ago, after Letang had a bad game in a playoff game, I looked at Dumoulin. I said, "Hey Dumo, could you and me like maybe co-write a book someday about what it's like to be Chris Letang's defense partner?" He just looks at me and goes, "Oh Christ!" Like that's all he said. Yeah, because I mean, it's when you're a stay-at-home guy, you just play so differently than what those guys play like, right? So yeah, it's a different kind of experience for sure. But I feel like Carlson, you know what you're getting from him. The defensive stuff doesn't bother me as much as it bothered everyone else. My only real issue with him, like he was part of the problem on the power play.
One thought and shoot and they're all doing it though. And hell, they did it last night. I mean, Austin Matthews was looking for sticks. How about looking for a hole behind the goaltender? I'm entirely sick of they're looking for the stick. Hey, shoot the puck. That was my biggest complaint with Carlson is that. But speaking of last night, though, everybody pitches. Joel Edmondson takes a bad pinch. Where is Joel Edmondson going?
Right.
Stay back. That's what I mean. I can't get upset about the Penguins because everyone plays this stupid. Everyone's that stupid now.
Well, like the way the season ended for the Penguins, you might recall the last 10 seconds of the Islanders game when Carlson just wouldn't shoot the puck. He just kept holding onto the puck and basically the clock ran out. I told you we were right behind the bench. And that was drawing this big curtain so the media can't see the players going up. Let's just say you could hear a very loud Boston accent scream, shoot the puck about 3 times during that stretch. You know exactly who it was. So, and Dubas even made a joke about it at his press conference. He said, I've had many conversations with Eric about just shooting the puck instead of trying to slap pass through 5 sticks. And Dubas said it like he was joking, but he was being serious. That's the thing. That's the Penguins' way. You bring Carlson into that, he's like, "Oh man, I found my home. This is how these guys play." And there's just too many people trying to be perfect, I think, all the time.
Right, and it's like how we always say, the power play, they go around and around and around and around, and because the one time it's perfection, they're going to make, hey, it worked one every 82 times, just like the slap past the Benstrom. Oh, it looked brilliant. The one time it worked, in all season.
It's always the worst thing that could happen to the Penguins is they score a beautiful goal. You're like, oh, well.
Oh. No, it's true. I mean, because then, oh man, look what we're capable of. We could do this all the time. You could tell Letang's probably been the biggest offender of that over the years. You could tell he just gets so happy when they score a pretty tic-tac-toe goal that just becomes like a project for them to figure out ways to do it instead of just scoring goals. There's no question that has been an issue over the years.
Yeah, ironically, I wish that Austin Matthews, would have been looking for a stick, like when he buried us up in Toronto. He got that pass, and like I'm sitting there thinking, God, that's what a power play should do. You just get the puck and you take a slap shot. Austin Matthews didn't, he didn't hesitate, and he blasted one home against us. 5 seconds into a power play. Ironically, now he's doing the opposite. So maybe teams are looking at the Penguins tape and going, I like those tic-toe passes. I mean, I like hearing that Erik Karlsson is pretty accountable. I'm curious, Josh. I mean, we mentioned the goaltending, and have you had any interactions with Tristan Jarry over this stretch here, or has he been, in and out of the locker room? I'm just curious. That's like what's Jarry's demeanor like, and do we really put weight behind, oh yeah, we just rode the hot hand, we're gonna have him back and he'll be a star goalie, or do you think his time is done?
I will not lie to our listeners. Tristan Jarry and I do not particularly get along, so I can't say that I've had much in the way of interactions with him. He hasn't been around much. When you're the quote-unquote backup goalie, you're on the ice a lot after practice. You're not really around the media much because you're putting in the extra work. No, I don't really buy the hot goalie thing. I mean, yeah, they were riding the hot hand. I think Tristan was in the doghouse very clearly. That Dallas game, if you go back and watch the game, March 22nd in Dallas, first goal of the game went off Marcus Pettersson's body and in the net. Tristan just stared Marcus down. He did it to Erik Karlsson in the second period too, I think on the 3rd or 4th goal. And I'm not saying that's why he was benched or that's why they weren't happy with him, but I've heard enough to think that might have had something to do with it. And he was kind of rubbing his teammates the wrong way. He doesn't have the greatest attitude in the world. There's just something kind of immature about him. I also think he's incredibly talented, but Ned is the most likable, personable guy. Notice Mike Sullivan always talks about how Ned battles and what great shape Ned is in. You never hear him say those things about Tristan Jarry, do you? So they don't come out and rip Jarry, but I don't think they're thrilled with him at the moment, put it that way.
Well, Badler is not something you put next to Tristan Jarry's name, I don't think.
No,
from what I've seen,
right.
But I'm just watching every second for my television or live, sometimes at the game. But yeah, I just think when you have a young kid that's coming up, something has to go. If he can move Jari, that would be amazing. I think his two biggest things this year, and I don't know, he did the old, talk up somebody, or maybe he crapped on him, but just talking about him in the future. But I think if he can somehow get rid of Graves and Jari, I think that'd be his two biggest. Because I think getting rid of Riley Smith won't be that hard. I think someone will take him in the summer. But if somehow he can get rid of Graves, because I just don't see Graves ever being. I know, Gonch had a first year and Paul Martin. I don't see it. I mean, if the dog doesn't bite when he's a puppy, he's not going to bite when he's an old dog. If he's not going to, I mean, he didn't hit anybody by accident.
No, and I have to
say, even refs get hit more than he did,
especially against Tampa.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
He's back in the lineup, by the way, today.
And I know that it's Pittsburgh, and we all want our defensemen to be all Samuelson, and I know that, but hey, get in somebody's way. I mean, please, dear God.
Yeah, Graves and Dubas ripped Graves pretty thoroughly at his press conference. He made it really clear he wasn't happy with him. He said the guy was a good player in Jersey and Colorado, and this wasn't what we were expecting. I mean, he said this summer's big for him. He basically said he needs to get stronger and faster, which is a weird thing to say about an NHL player at 29 years old. He talked about his lack of mobility, and hey, listen, Kyle wishes he hadn't have made that deal. We all know that. Can he really get rid of Ryan Graves' salary? I doubt it. I mean, more power to him if he can. You would have to put in a lot of pieces in a trade to entice a team to take him off the books, I think. Smith, yeah, I think they could trade him, and I think they probably will. He just wasn't a very good fit. Jari's the interesting one to me, though. I mean, listen, he makes a lot of money. Okay, 4 more years left on the deal, but he is a good goaltender. And look around the team. Look at the playoffs right now. Good teams that have goaltending issues. Colorado, Toronto, teams, Edmonton. These are, cup contending teams with huge question marks in goal. If I'm a Penguins fan, I'm rooting against all those teams I just mentioned. Hope they flame out in the first round. Their GMs are desperate for goaltending help, because I just don't think the Penguins are ever going to win with Jari. I just don't. I don't trust him in big games. I don't know that he has the mental toughness to be that guy. You got Blomqvist coming up, who should be ready next season. I think Ned is a good bridge goaltender. I think it's something they really have to consider.
Geez, Josh, I wonder why you and Tristan don't get along.
I'm kidding. The thing with Jari, though, is he's been here 5 years?
Yep.
At least four. He's never made the save. If he makes 3 big ones, then he'll let another one go through, so you're still tied 4-4. Yep. He never just slams the door when that's it, like on a big game. Right. And that's all you really need out of a goaltender. I don't need to lead the league in shutouts. I need you to lead the league in 1-goal wins.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And that's always, and that was what separated Marc-Andre Fleury a lot, even when he was young. When he was still finding his way in the NHL, he would make that big save at the big moment when he needed it. And
I'll tell you what, I will say this, and Lord knows, as the only thing I hate more than the Flyers is Ron Hextall himself. That, our buddy Billy G, he gave his buddy old Marc-Andre Fleury hey, you won the cup with me, 2.25 this year.
That's right.
For next year.
No, you're absolutely
that smelled like Jeff Carter. Now, I understand, hey, everyone loves Flower, but I mean, you can get somebody the way Flowers, and I'm not trying to knock the Flower, but 2.25 for his performance this year, a little steep for a guy in salary cap hell.
Yeah, he was not great this year. By the way, Since it's about the third time you've mentioned how much you hate the Flyers in this segment, it actually made me think of my good friend, the old 2-9er, Phil Bork. Old 2-9er always goes into other teams' locker rooms to talk with other players after practices, morning skates.
2 minutes with the old 2-9er.
Little tidbit about the 2-9er. He has never in his life stepped foot in the Philadelphia Flyers locker room, and he won't do it, which is one of my favorite things about him.
Well, if you read the book that Josh you wrote with him, which great book, by the way, if anybody hasn't read If These Walls Could Talk,
the best.
You can feel it come off the page, like it is like Pulitzer Prize winning, authorship of like how his hatred of the Flyers is palpable.
Well, you know what? You know why? Because the old 2-9er, he was around like me. He remembers when they stuck it in our ass all the time.
Yeah, and people don't.
The people like you got Lindros was a jerk, or we hate Giroux. Yeah, that's all given. But I lived through 1974 to 1989.
Well, and his description too of that 15 years without winning in Philly, it's really hard to understand. I mean, obviously, I was a young kid whenever it ended, so I don't even remember that whole thing. But I've watched that Mario video, which, by the way, is what our intro song is from, enough times to know that was a monumental. That was you couldn't win I don't think the Penguins could win the cup until they got over that Flyers hump.
My friend Tony Caruso, who his family used to own the Pasta 2 on the north side, and a couple other friends of mine, they went to Philly for that game. And I think Fedco or Staggerwald, somebody interviewed them at the Spectrum after the game. It's in some archive somewhere. God rest his soul. My Cuddy passed away, unfortunately. But he could have, it's legendary like that. It was literally like winning. It was almost like 1980.
I believe
almost like 1980.
I believe Paulson and Kren did their show that morning.
That's it. And that's it. Yeah, those guys
like
have the footage of those guys.
Yeah. I remember that well. Yeah, I was a kid, but I remember I was 8 years old. I did the thing where my mom made me go to bed, before the game was over, and I was free. So I literally, stereotypical thing, I had the transmitter radio under my pillow, like listening to Mike and Staggy in the third period, because until the game ended, I thought there was no way they were going to win, because in my whole lifetime, they'd never won in Philadelphia. You just assumed it could never actually happen. And when you talk with guys from the early 90s, from those teams, they will tell you how big that moment was. That was when they kind of said, you know what, we might actually have something here. Like we might actually have a chance to be a really good team, because until then, that they didn't think it was possible. And in the spectrum, they could win anywhere.
It's still crazy. It's crazy how they had us pinned to the ground for 15 years. I mean, it was. That's what I mean. It's like it'll never, they try to force feed the Capitals, and when Adam Graves, his thing, there was about 3 years when it was close to that level of hatred, but no, it's the Flyers and everybody else. Like you'll never get me remotely that kind of hatred. But we should do some playoff picks next segment.
Yeah. And I just want to say, as much as I love the 09 Cup, 07 going 8-0 against the Flyers, followed by beating them in the Eastern Conference Finals at home. Sid putting the game away with the tip in from behind his back. That was pretty sweet. So that's something that us, millennials will take to the grave.
I just have one final tidbit for this Block A thing, and not tidbit, but in that 8-0 in the 90s, 1997, we went 8-0.
2007,
2007. I'm sorry. What disturbed me was when we won that last game, like 7-1 or 7-0, right? They didn't even fight us. And I'm like, you bastards. Because we finally had some dudes, like we say, like Rue too. We would have won that too, And I forget who the heavyweight was at the time, but we had Scary Gary, and it was like, oh my God, you guys won't even fight. That's I should save that for another time. But Gary Roberts, his fight against the Flyers that year. We'll talk about it some other. We have so much summer programming, and I want to tell the story correctly. So
I do want to get to the next segment of talking about, just to tease it about playoff picks and everything like that. But Josh, did you have something else about the Flyers? Because I wanted to talk about the Gensel thing real quick.
I just said we should devote a show this summer strictly to hatred of the Philadelphia Flyers from the other side of the Commonwealth. Joe's got a big smile on his face. I can tell he would enjoy that. But
Yeah.
yes, we got to save some of the goods for the summer. But Jake Gensel, what do you got?
I thought it was alarming to me. Like, is this team really that soft that, their friend getting traded was that I mean, we saw it, but like to hear the GM actually talk about it, I was like, ugh, like that doesn't make me feel real good about the team going forward if they're losing a friend. This is pro sports. Like, suck it up.
I forget how Kyle worded it exactly, but he essentially said if we would have gotten over the emotional difficulty of that trade, maybe we would have made the playoffs. And he's got a point. I mean, I don't disagree with him. I really don't. Trades are a part of the sport. I know the Penguins were upset when they traded Paul Coffey and Mark Recchi back in 92, but I don't recall them pouting and going on a big losing streak because of it, which is basically what happened. I don't know if it was so much because they traded Gensel or if because the veterans all thought, man, Kyle's breaking this thing up. Like he doesn't believe in us. We're seller. I think it may have been more that than just Jake, even though Jake's a really popular guy in that locker room. But yeah, it wasn't the greatest look for the Penguins. I give them credit for the way they bounced back from it. But you go back to the night he was traded against Washington. That was a home game against the Caps, so 7-0 or whatever. I mean, that was the ultimate no-show from the Penguins. And in the Crosby era, you don't really see those.
Well, I will say this about about the Jake thing is I think it was, I mean, when Recchi left, I mean, my grandma, that was her favorite Italian homegrown Pittsburgh guy, I mean, it's Mark Recchi, the wrecking ball. Seeing him in the Flyer Hall of Fame makes me puke. But yeah, I agree with, I think, yeah, they do like Jake as a friend. I think it was more like, oh, we're kind of giving up the white flag. And
Yeah.
I think that Sid and Gino never thought the Penguins ever are going to run up the white flag. And I think it did take him, it took him back. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I mean, it's never been that way.
Yeah. And seeing Jake sit on the bench there, all I could picture was, or hear in my head was Steve Burns' voice of Jake when he does the Penguin promos. If you ever heard those on the DB morning show, he's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, this is Jake Gensel." All I can think of, like, that's, I heard like my inner monologue, like Jake's in there, like, "Hey, I really like this arena," or something like that. I'm not a comedian, so I'm gonna try, but I just felt bad for him. It just looked so sad, and and now I can't. I mean, I still really can't watch Hurricane games. It's hard to stomach. But yeah, let's wrap up this first segment of Two for Talking. We'll bring it back here in segment number 2. We'll talk a little bit of NHL playoff predictions, going through the rounds, see what we think is going to happen. All right, welcome back in for the second segment of Two for Talking. Playoff predictions. So first off, I mean, yesterday we had Toronto lay an egg. And you're in Canada now, Josh. So what does the province of Ontario feel like after? Is it the, oh no, here we go again?
Yeah, there's people, they have all their Blue Jays hats on and all their Maple Leafs hats on. I saw them today. They're all walking around with their heads down, looking kind of sad. Then I saw one guy at the mall with his Bruins shirt on with his chest puffed out. I mean, we know how this story goes, right? Like, I don't even think the Bruins are that good on paper. And the Maple Leafs, they're top heavy, but they certainly have star power. But it just feels preordained that the Bruins are going to win this series. That it's a winning culture against a losing culture. And until proven otherwise, I have a hard time thinking the Leafs are going to beat them.
Yeah, did you see the guy at the Blue Jays game putting it was 4-0, and they cut to him on TV like it was just a fan. He had a Maple Leafs jersey on, and he was putting a Blue Jay shirt over top of it. the announcer said, "Yeah, it's 4-0. You might want to do that." So yeah,
I can't imagine being at a baseball game during a playoff hockey game.
Yeah,
But that's another story. I made my pick. I picked Toronto in 7.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Because I thought that Matthews with Bertuzzi and Domi was a new look, and I think it killed him that Nylander couldn't play, because I think it made their third line it made them the Penguins' third line. And I thought their biggest advantage was spreading the wealth out to 3 lines, because I thought Boston could match up to 1.5 of them. So I think that earlier maybe he comes back, and I think I'm still a little bit positive about the Leafs only because they weren't going to win 2 games there. They just have to get a
Right.
split. So and I made the pick, so I stick with it. As
No,
much
I
as I'm like,
respect that.
oh Jesus Christ, why did I do? How much of it? Why would I ever think this could happen? But
Here's the thing. I don't think Boston's that good. Like I think they're very beatable. I don't like them down the middle at all. So like if you took away the names Maple Leafs and Bruins and just like put together the players, I might pick the Leafs. Like to me, it's a 50-50 series. I just base some of it on history. It feels like Penguins Capitals. Like I've read this book before, and until they beat them, I just have a hard time going against the Bruins, even though I think they're flawed.
And then we had the Islanders play a beautiful game of hockey yesterday. And lose 3-1 to the Hurricanes. So that's the other one that's already started. So we've got I don't see the Islanders being able to muster anything, even though the Hurricanes aren't exactly, the 80 Oilers.
well, I had Canes in 5, and what I said all along was, Rob Brind'Amour, we play hard. That's why you're always in first place, because you play hard in Winnipeg in February. I get it. And they always needed scoring. So when they went out and got Jake and they got Kuzi, somehow Kuzi flapping his wings doesn't hurt nearly as bad when he's in Carolina and it does when he plays the Penguins. But and as Kuzi came through, a goal and an assist. I have Carolina in 5. The old Patrick gentleman sweep. Give the Islanders a home win in 5.
I also have Carolina in 5. That sounds about right. Listen, the Islanders play hard. They're hard to score against. What's going on with Sorokin, by the way? It's kind of strange. I mean, I've had many Penguins tell me he's the best goalie in the league, like as recently as 3 or 4 months ago, and not, obviously he wasn't playing great down the stretch and doesn't get the start, so that's interesting. But I just don't think they can beat Carolina. They play similarly in a lot of ways. They both play really hard. Carolina's just younger and faster and has more talent up front. I just think they're too good, and I don't see the Islanders as being a real threat to them.
Well, it's spread out now. Like now they got Svechnikov, who's just a beast on the third line. And when Nashis plays, he's very mercurial. I can use that big word. When he's on his game, there's a lot. It's a lot to like on that team. I think the thing with Sorokin versus Varlamov is Varlamov was Patty's guy in Colorado.
That's
right. So I think they have a little bit of a bond. Be interesting to see Sorokin out there if he's dangled. I mean, we're not going to use him, but somebody certainly could. Somebody certainly could.
You're not.
Did you see he didn't even he couldn't even get a chair to sit on. They didn't have a chair for him in the backup spot down in Carolina.
Maybe Cower was sitting there.
I know, that's what I was gonna say. Maybe Cower used it to go crank the horn again. Or something.
That unforgivable.
And then I did just the game ended, I think, around the time we were.
Oh, don't tell me. I have it on TiVo. Don't tell me, please.
Okay. All right. Well, then I will tell you. But what's your pick for Lightning Panthers?
I will go first. I have the Big Cats in 7, but I'll tell you this. I was completely prepared to take Tampa Bay over the Bruins. I think Tampa Bay might be the second best team in the East when things are rolling. But I just think Florida's got a little too much to handle, and they were my favorite team all year as far as who I thought was the best team in hockey. So if Bobrovsky's going to play and all their defensemen are going to be healthy, I think they're a wagon. But I still think it's going to take 7 because of Cooper and Hedman and Vasilevsky and the Hall of Fame line and the Hall of Fame power play. But I'm taking Big Cats in 7. That's a war.
Yeah, I've got Florida in 7 also. And Joe, I wrote it last week. In my article after the Penguins beat Boston, I wrote if Boston has to play Tampa, Tampa's going to win that series. I love that matchup against Boston. Pretty unlucky for Tampa that they have to play Florida. It might be the 2 best teams in the East. I mean, they're 2 of the 3 best with Carolina. I think those are the best 3, maybe with the Rangers. But I just think Florida is too deep, and they're too good 5-on-5. There's no stopping that Tampa power play. But I just think Florida's better. I just think top to bottom, I just feel like it's their time to finally beat Tampa. Tampa's always been their big brother. But I think Florida is so deep, and as good as Tampa is on the power play, that's the one thing they aren't. Their bottom 6 isn't that good. They're banged up on the blue line, and Vasilevsky hasn't been himself really all season. So I give Florida the edge. But that's my favorite series in the first round. I mean,
That's why I don't want spoilers.
and I know what happened, so I won't tell you. But I mean, that's just a great series, great hockey games.
I know it's too
really
bad it's 9:30 in the morning. And it's like I have more hockey to get up for. It's like it's terrible when the Penguins play 9 a.m. on like Saturday or Sunday. It's like, oh my God, you're gonna get my coffee before. It would always be down 3-0 to the Flyers before I had my coffee. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah, the Tampa. I mean, that's who I have. I actually think here's a weird thing. I have picked Tampa in my betting situation. I picked Tampa to win the series, but then the
situation. I like how you worded that.
Yeah, betting, but then I hedged it, and I picked in a futures. I picked the Panthers to win the cup. Like I for some reason I think if the Panthers beat Tampa, I think they go. I think they're at least in the cup final. They're that good. So, yeah. And then I have a feeling we all know who's where everyone's picking between the Rangers and the Capitals. The try hard
because
Capitals.
I said on Puck Off, I said 7, but then I wrote in my article Rangers in 5. I do just think there's some mojo. I think Mr. Charlie is going to have a couple big saves. I think you can't TJ Oshie. Those guys score some big goals at weird times. They seem hard to go away. And I also think, I'm not going to, relive everything, but, they were a Trouba elbow away from kind of really derailing Igor Shesterkin's career. And I think you can get in his head. Unfortunately for Ranger haters, they got Quickie's incredible backup if somehow Igor falters. But I'm not as high on Igor as everybody else in the world seems to be. But I think the Rangers are just top to bottom a much better team. But I got Rangers in 5. But I think it's going to be a hard series every game for the Rangers.
I've got Rangers in 6. I think they just have too much talent. But Washington's hard to score against. And one thing I'll say about the Rangers, they're not that great 5-on-5. Wonderful power play. You get them in one of those games where the whistles are in the pockets. That wouldn't work out as well for them, I don't think. So I think as President's Trophy teams go, I think they're vulnerable. I don't view them as one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the East. I think they're good. But that said, I don't think the Capitals are that good, and I give them credit for what they've done down the stretch, but I think the Rangers eventually will pull away.
Don't you think that their defensemen, though, I've said this for a couple years, they're not as good. They don't play as good as the sum of their parts. Like Adam Fox, Norris guy, Lindgren. I love Ryan Lindgren. I mean, he's just scrap iron. Keandre Miller, I think if there was no Adam Fox there, they'd be pushing him for the Norris.
Miller's a great player, right?
Yeah. Trouba's Trouba. Schneider kid's good. But as a unit, they don't seem to play that good of defense. I don't know why.
No, they don't. I mean, and I always, a couple of years ago when the Penguins had them on the ropes and we know they should have beaten them, like I never felt like the Rangers were that well coached back then. Like I just, you could see holes in their attack, and defensively they were never on the same page, even though from an individual talent standpoint, you're right, they have a ton of it. I think they're a little better coached now. But you still get good looks against them, I don't think their forwards are all that good defensively. I think that's part of the problem as well. And listen, they're a good team. The Rangers end up in the final. I'm not going to be shocked. I don't know. When I watch them play, I'm not blown away. I feel like there's a team in the East that's probably going to beat them. And in fact, if they play Carolina in the second round, I think that's a tough matchup for the Rangers because Carolina is so good defensively. They're just in your face. They 200 feet. They make you, they're in your face playing defense. That they can outskate just about anybody. So that could be a tough matchup for them. But I still think the Blue Shirts will prevail in this one.
In a way, Josh, don't you think the Rangers are just a better version of the Penguins? Like they're an unstructured team that just has overwhelming talent.
Yeah,
because and they don't play good against structured teams. Like the Penguins love teams that just want to wheel in. That's why they play good against the good teams. Because most of the time, the good teams, well, hey, the neutral zone's a neutral zone. Nobody cares. They're going to free. We'll trade chances. We'll have some fun. We're out here to have fun.
Comes to town, like ooh.
Oh yeah, but then the teams that are structured that actually play a forward lock or any kind of or back check. Hey, we didn't sign up for this game.
Like
Carolina. Whoa, who's this trying out here?
I think the Penguins did beat Carolina twice this season. They beat them in the home games.
Yeah.
And that was noteworthy because they never play well against that team.
No, ever.
Jeff Carter told me last year, he goes, man, this team's a bitch to play against. I said, why? He said, well, they play defense 200 feet down the rink, which is really his way of saying, like, we don't like when teams do that. We want to skate. You're right. They hate playing teams like that. That's why if the Penguins had been the second wild card and played the Rangers with the way the Penguins were going, that would have been a really interesting series.
Yeah.
The perfect team for the Penguins to play against.
Yeah. And then out west we got Dallas and the Vegas Golden Knights. I'll probably catch some hate if any Dallas people see it, but I think Seth Rarbaugh posted or retweeted a picture that it was Tyler Seguin. And in the background, you could see the retired numbers at the practice facility. And there's way too many retired numbers for the Dallas/Minnesota franchise. So just because of that, I have to pick against them. I also think the defending champs have something to say. But let me look. They have, you got the older guys, but then you got Madonna, obviously, Leighton. Come on, Zubov, his jersey's hanging. I love Zubov and everything, but come on.
It's easy to stand at a point of pride when all we have is a tragedy, and then 2 of the 10 greatest players of all time retired, and 5 cups. But you look at the Bluesers. That's why we call them the Bluesers. Before they won the cup in 18, they literally have like 30 numbers retired, and they never won a goddamn thing. Like, how can these players be glorified? I don't think they've ever gotten past in the Western Finals.
I always notice when I'm in Toronto, I think they have 19 guys numbers retired. I haven't heard of half of them. It's unbelievable. Like, who's this guy? I've never even heard of him. I know he didn't win a cup. Like, what? It's incredible.
On that note, I am taking the Dallas Stars in 6. I've been on the Dallas bandwagon all year, and if Ottinger is on his game, and I know like every team if their goaltender plays, but I love Heiskanen. I love the Harley kid. I think their defense is mobile and big, and they'll hit people, and they have waves of offense. You get the Pasadena kid, Robertson, Sagan, and Benner still playing at the height. Rupe Hintz reminds me of young Evgeny Malkin. This probably Pavelski's best chance. Wyatt Johnson's got 30 goals. Wyatt Johnson, you couldn't pick out a lineup. I just think Dallas is I think Dallas is probably the best. I think the best team out west if you add everything together. But I got them in 6.
Yeah, I've got Dallas in 6 also. I just think they're the most complete team in the league right now. Like, tell me what their weakness is. I don't think they have one. And they bring in Tanev on the blue line, really solidified things. They're a hard team to score against. Their goaltender's really good. And you're right, they're young and big and fast and forward. They're deep, and they've still got the old guys. Sagan and Ben can still play. Pavelski, I wouldn't want to play them in a playoff series. They're built to win in the playoffs. The West is so good that it's hardly a lock they get through the West. They could lose this year. Who knows? Vegas is an X factor. I don't know how good they really are, but they do know how to turn it up a notch in the playoffs. We know that. So it's probably not who Dallas wanted to play in the first round. I'd rather play Nashville if I were them, but I just think they're too good, and I don't see them.
Hey, Duchesne, he revamped his career in Dallas this year. He's underrated right now. They just have so much
hockey team. Yeah,
they have an abundance of talent on that team.
Yeah, it's just that if Vegas can do the Undertaker and stand up and come back to life, magically, and manipulate the salary cap, maybe they do something. But yeah, I think Dallas.
Corey, everyone bitches about the Vegas Golden Knights over the cap. Every team in the Western Conference except the Nashville Predators, their playoff lineup is over the cap.
I blame the NHL. I don't blame the teams. Trying to win.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that little tidbit out there.
The next series is, I believe, the best goaltender in the playoffs versus possibly the worst goaltender in the playoffs. That would be the Winnipeg Jets versus the Colorado Avalanche. I think like you said earlier, Josh, if you're a Penguins fan, you're kind of rooting for Colorado to flame out here and then come knocking for Tristan Jarry. I think the Jets can do it. I don't, I'm not the expert, but I'll hear what you guys say, what you think is going to happen in this series.
Sometimes you second guess yourself after you make your picks. I picked Colorado in 7. I don't feel comfortable with it at all. The Jets have the way better goaltender. Now Jonathan Drouin's out for the series for Colorado. That's kind of a big loss. He's been pretty good for them. I think Colorado, when healthy, is the best team in the league if you just take away the goaltending. If you're just talking about the 18 skaters. Their goaltending, though, Georgiev has been really brutal down the stretch, really bad. They don't have much behind him either. So I'm going to pick Colorado just because I love their talent so much. But I would not be shocked if the Jets win this series. And for the good people of Winnipeg, man, they've been waiting for a team like this for a long time. It would not be the worst thing to see them make a run.
I almost have the same exact quotes, Josh, on that. I picked Colorado early. I was happy with my pick, and then they find out Duchesne's not playing, and then you watch like the last two games, and you see Georgiev is just like a an orange cone out there. I just and I know Winnipeg is the real. I know it's Canadian, so it's a big trendy pick. I just have a hard time seeing. I don't care who's in that. I don't care if Casey DeSmith is in that. I have a hard time. He's my personal whipping boy. I have a hard time seeing Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar not coming through there. I still don't understand the Byram for Casey Middlestat trade. Nothing against Casey Middlestat, but gave away a heck of a good defenseman. Heck of a good defenseman for three a glorified three. I don't know, but I don't know. But Laurie's a big time center. Maybe he can stop McKinnon. I don't get the wheels. If McKinnon wants to, if McKinnon pulls a Sid, which Lord knows he can, I got Avs in 7, but I don't feel as strong as I did a week ago about it.
And then we got down there with GMJR and his Vancouver Canucks taking on the Predators. I don't have a good feel for this one because honestly, I don't have a good feel for either the Canucks or the Predators. I think obviously the Canucks are the much better team. So that's probably going to be a relatively simple series. But what do you guys think?
I've got Vancouver in 7. I don't like how they've been playing. They feel really vulnerable to me. They got their goaltender Demko back though, and that could be a really big deal, obviously, for them, unless you want to see Casey DeSmith in a playoff game, which I don't think anybody really does.
Surprised he's not hurt.
Right, yeah, right. Nashville's been great. I mean, on paper, they don't blow you away, but they've been one of the best teams in the league in the second half. They could win this series. I just think Vancouver's better, and I think they will find a way. I don't look at Vancouver as a team that can realistically come out of the West right now. I just think there are too many heavyweights for them. But they've been a great story all year, and they've got a lot of top-tier talent with Pedersen and Miller and Hughes. They can really score. I think it's a fun series. I'll give the Canucks the edge in 7, but it'll be tight.
I got Canucks in 7. I almost any other team I think I would have taken over the Canucks, but I think Nashville is just a tier below most of the big boys out west. Although I've never been the biggest Roman Josi fan until this year. Roman Josi, when people weren't putting up Sega PlayStation stats, he might be in an MVP race. I mean, he's been amazing this year. Soros is a very good goaltender. Ryan O'Reilly's not going to go down without a fight, but I do think Vancouver's lucky. They might have got the one team that might just kind of be happy to be there so that Demko can find his playoff legs and the rest of the team can kind of take a deep breath. And even if you lose a couple, you still probably have an abundance of talent. And Rick knows what he's doing, but I have the Canucks. I have the Canucks in 7.
And last but not least, we have Joe's mistress team, which they might become my mistress team too, because I'm rooting for them over the Edmonton Oilers. I don't see it happening, but boy, would I love to see the Kings pull one out here.
It's the worst possible thing that could have happened to the Kings was playing Edmonton again, because I believe they're in their heads, and I've been well documented for a year talking about how much I hated that Puke Dubois trade. But the one thing the Kings had on Edmonton was depth, and they gave it all away. They gave it to Winnipeg. I love Kopitar. Kempe is a real hockey player. Byfield's playing. The Kings have more depth. They still have a lot of depth, but they're talking about a team that could use a goaltender. The Kings goaltending stinks. I mean, Stu Skinner might not be Grant Fuhrer, but he's a hell of a lot better than what the Kings have. I think both defenses are adequate. I think the forwards are kind of the same because the Kings do have depth. Obviously, Jesus and Leon are cut above everybody, but I think Edmonton in 7 in an absolute war. I feel bad for the Kings. I wish they got somebody else, but I think Jesus has their Kings don't play enough defense to really stop Jesus and Leon when it completely matters. Like last year, it was close. Then all of a sudden, they were like, "Oh, wait a second, we're going to win this series, right?" And then they did.
I think the Kings are pretty good, and I think they could have beaten some teams in the Western field. Like they're kind of built to play in the playoffs, and they have really good defensive centers. So theoretically, that could make them a tricky matchup against Draisaitl and McDavid. I mean, you have these defensive forwards who can give them fits, but the Oilers know them so well. Seems like they always play in the playoffs now, right? I've got Edmonton in 5, and I bet there'll be 5 good games. I just think the Oilers have a gear that the Kings don't have, and it's just the wrong team for the Kings to play at the wrong time. So I think the Oilers roll in this series, and even though the Oilers of this generation have never made it to the final, they've only made it to one conference final. It's never McDavid and Draisaitl's fault. Those two always show up. They're always great. It's always the rest of the team that's been the problem. I still don't know that Edmonton's deep enough to be an actual cup team, but I don't see them going out in the first round.
No, and I think Henrique was a sneaky good pickup at the deadline. Yeah, he's a legitimate, solid third-line center, which lets them spread out or load up if they need to. I like Leon and Jesus on 2 separate lines, but when they combine them, then they did not have a second-line center. And Henrique, he's not Ronnie Francis, but he's a pretty good second-line center. And if you're going to only play 3 lines in a game 5, game 6 or 7 down the road. And the other kid they got, the tougher kid from the Ducks, I'm spacing his name. I thought they had a good deadline. Did they go get a better goalie? No. Did they go get a better a thumper defenseman? No. But I think Edmonton's. I don't know, man. Look, when they go 800 down the last 50 games. I mean, they were out of the playoffs in the Christmas, and then they almost won the President's Trophy. So
they could win the whole thing, and it wouldn't shock me. I mean, they could. The role they've been on. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's we'll come back for one more segment. That's going to do it for segment number 2 on 2 for Talking. Last segment, we're going to get into just a little bit of Steelers draft talk and a little bit of Buccos back to being Suckos and Paul Skeens. So keep it right here for 2 for Talking. Welcome back to the third segment of 2 for Talking. And the NFL draft is coming up next week. Or is it this week? It's this Thursday, right? Yeah. Holy crap. So everybody, make sure you go Google where can I stream draft day, because you got to watch that movie once a year. It's a terrible movie, but I watch it every year. I don't know why. And so yeah, I got to watch that, and then I get ready for the Steelers to hopefully, in my opinion, pick Cooper DeJean. But I just wanted to get your guys' opinions on where you think they should go. And briefly, where do you think they should pick? Should they go center first? How are the Steelers going to round out their roster in the draft?
Sure sounds like they're going to go offensive line in the first round. That's what everybody seems to think. Help me with the name. The right tackle from Georgia is a name that's been rumored out there quite a bit. I'm freezing on his name. I know he's only played 8 games at the college level, but apparently he's a freak physically. So I think that's a possibility, but center has been an issue for so long. Like my mother calls me the other day. She's like, Josh, they got to draft a center. I don't like it when they don't have a good center. I said, well, Mom, Mike Webster's dead. Demarni Dawson's like 60. Like, I'm sorry. You can't always have a Hall of Fame center. But she's like, yeah, but the center's terrible. I know. They've had bad centers for a while. There's no doubt. So there's 2 or 3 good ones. You have to think in the first 2 or 3 rounds, bare minimum, they will take a center.
I concur. I think there's 3 or 4 centers that are like, in the first round capable. That's where I would go. I'm always for the big badass from an SEC power school. So if they want to draft the right tackle, I'm all for it. Have the 2 tackles from Georgia. To me, if you play Georgia and Alabama, you're going to be pretty good. It's a good place to start. Not like,
Right.
you face some competition. People are talking wide receiver. I don't know. It seems like there's a million guys that can catch a 10, an 8-yard slant. I wouldn't know if I'd give up my first round draft pick on that. So
Well, and it's a really deep draft for receivers. So, you can get a guy in the second round who may have been a first round talent. That's I think what a lot of people expect to happen. That's okay. But and the offensive line has made strides the last couple of years, but you got to get Broderick Jones to the left side. And that's where you
Yep.
draft him to be your left tackle, right? So if they can do something to help in that department, I think that's a good thing.
And I'm blanking on trying to figure out who is it? Is it Amarius Mims? Is
Yeah,
that who it
Mims.
is? Yeah,
Yeah,
Mims.
yeah, yeah.
That's who it was.
I
Um,
know he's a guy that's been discussed a lot. So I'd be surprised if it's not an offensive lineman in the first round. Put it that way.
yeah, it's funny. I'm just like your mom because I, grew up under the Dirt Dawson era. So it's like, and then you get Pouncey. So, well, I mean, if we have a good center, we know we're fine. I'd love to see that. And I know Joe and I are the resident Michigan. That's my pen, the Michigan pen, the Michigan fans here. So Roman Wilson, I'd love if the Steelers could snag him in the second round. I'm salivating over that because you go back and look. I mean, I follow so many Michigan accounts that I see highlights all the time popping up on Twitter. But some of the catches he made, the battle catches for a little guy, he's to me he kind of has a little bit of Heinz Ward in him. But I first round, I'd be pretty thrilled with Cooper DeJean. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but yeah, who knows? They need to figure.
Cooper DeJean sounds like a center from the Quebec Ontario League.
Cooper DeJean, yeah, he's. I think a lot of people up in Quebec they name their kids after the hockey equipment. There are a lot of Milex up there, and yeah, no, that's where I think they're going. And then just real quick before we wrap up, the Buccos. I know Joe is not the biggest baseball fan. You said baseball has left you, but the Buccos turn back into the Suckos. Meanwhile, Paul
With
Skeens
conviction.
is
Yeah.
yeah. Meanwhile, Paul Skeens is down there tearing it up. And what are we waiting for? I mean, how long did they have to wait till he gets that extra year of control?
Well, they're only letting him throw like 50 pitches right now. He's still on a very pronounced pitch count, which I understand. I don't mean to sound like an old man. I understand they're trying to protect people's arms. It's getting kind of ridiculous, though. He clearly has no competition at AAA at all. Every time you hear Skeen's numbers, like, oh, he went 3 1/3 innings, no runs, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts. We're like, oh, okay. He's just utterly dominant. And my biggest problem with the Pirates over the years, yeah, they don't spend money. Yeah, they stink. My biggest issue has been they're not worth watching. They're boring. And here's a guy who is going to be a box office attraction from the second he shows up. He's a phenom pitcher. Everybody wants to see him. I'm sure they'll bring him up in June like they always do, but man, I would not mind if he were at PNC Park right now. It would make me far more likely to show up on the north side on a Tuesday night, just to watch this kid pitch. So hopefully he will be arriving sooner rather than later.
The last time I went to a Pirate game was who was the last great pitcher that came through the Pirates? He was a big deal, and he went to the Yankees.
Garrett
Garrett
Cole.
Cole.
Derek Cole. Yeah, we were. I flew back to Pittsburgh because me and Burr were going to go watch Game 5 of Bruins Penguins. Oh well, we got swept.
Yeah. Whoops.
So Burr was able to change his plane ticket. I couldn't take the change fee, so I flew anyway. And then me and Crawford were at a bar on the South Side watching the Pirate game, and like we should just go to the game. So he just walked over and went to the game. And I think he pitched pretty good, had a double, but that was it. Ever since then, I've been offered tickets. I was offered to go on the field with Steve Byrne. I'm like, I'd rather just sleep in. But yeah, there's good food. I could go to Permanis. There's like 90 locations. I don't have to go to a Pirate game to eat a Permani sandwich.
You're not wrong.
Did you see the hot dog that the Renegade dog, which came out and as about as hot as the actual Renegade pitcher did?
Yeah, the ingredients sounded a little frightening for me. I enjoy a nice hot dog at the ballpark. I do not need a Renegade dog.
Well, all right, everybody. Thank you guys. Thank you, Josh and Joe. I know we got to get running, and we went long on the first segment, but there was just too much to talk about
There's a
the
lot.
Penguins.
Yeah, a lot
It's-
going on.
Penguins.
It's going to be that way for a little bit. So yeah, but everybody check out the games this week, and I'm sure we're going to have plenty of hockey to talk about next Sunday. And we'll drop this we're hoping to drop these every Monday. So everybody, I appreciate it. You can reach out to us, you can follow us on Twitter, also email the show, the number 2 for talking podcast at gmail.com. And if you send in a question or anything like that and we didn't get to it, I apologize, but we were a little crammed today. So we enjoy it as always. And thanks guys for joining.
Thanks, you guys. And come see me at the Improv May 23rd.
May 23rd.
I will be there.
You guys are on the list. Everybody else
on the
buy
list?
tickets.
Oh, perfect.
And the good news is that's the day before my anniversary, so I don't have to come up with an excuse. But what more romantic way to celebrate your anniversary than going to listen to Joe Bartnick talk about his shower antics?
I bring couples together because people are like, well, at least you're not married. At least I'm not married to him.
There you go. Get me two tickets, please.
If you want to not look at your hot dogs the same this summer whenever you're pouring mustard on them, then just listen to Joe Bartnick talk about.
Oh, that's from my special on Amazon Prime. Check it out. You won't hear that joke, hopefully.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks as always. We'll talk to you next week.